Hello everyone. Have you ever found yourself in this frustrating situation? You finally buy a high-end TV, get ready to enjoy an epic football match or your favorite movie, and then suddenly, the screen coldly displays. No signal. Just look at this. Even a premium Sony TV becomes nothing more than a lifeless metal box without an antenna. Feeling pretty disappointed, I walked over to the table and sat down, and at that moment, I spotted a Samsung charger lying on the table. And suddenly, an idea flashed into my mind. I built a signal receiver myself from these random objects. First, I used another Sony charger as one of the two main parts of the antenna. Next, I took out an old SIM card and tried fitting it directly into the slot beside the charger. But it was slightly too large. I carefully removed the plastic border around the SIM card, trimming it down to reduce the size. After adjusting it, I tried inserting it again, and this time, it fit perfectly and quite securely. Next, I took a small piece of aluminum foil, folded it neatly, and inserted it into the slot together with the SIM card. This helps increase the metal contact area, allowing signals to conduct more effectively. After finishing the core section, I moved on to the second part of the system, the circuit board. I took a small wooden board. First, I glued the SIM card firmly in the center of the board, making sure the gold contacts faced outward for easier access. Once the SIM card was securely fixed, I grabbed a marker and started labeling the surrounding areas with GND, signal, D+, 3.3 volt, and VCC. Next, I drew connection lines from each SIM contact to the corresponding labeled positions. At this point, the whole setup looked like a miniature electronic circuit diagram. Then, I gently scraped the copper layer on the SIM contacts. This step is necessary so solder can properly stick during soldering. Next, I used a soldering iron and solder to tin the 6 scraped contact points on the SIM card. This step will make it easier for us to solder the copper wires later on. Then, I prepared 6 copper wires. After that, I used a soldering iron along with flux and carefully soldered thin copper wires onto each contact point. This process required extreme precision because the contacts were tiny. Just one small mistake could cause a short circuit. Once the wiring was complete, I started securing the system. I drilled screws into the marked positions on the wooden board. Then wrapped each wire around its corresponding screw to create solid connections. To make the setup look even more technical, I added a transistor. I glued it onto the board using hot glue. Then soldered its legs into the wiring system. The white wire connected to GND, the yellow wire connected to 3.3 volts, and the red wire connected to VCC. Next came the power supply. I took a USB cable, stripped off the outer insulation to expose the wires inside. I used the red wire as positive power and another wire as ground, connecting them to the D+ and D positions on the board. Now came the most important part, the receiving antenna. I took a piece of copper wire and coiled it into a spring shape, then soldered it onto the signal board. And just like that, the circuit system was complete. Looking at the entire setup, it looked quite complicated. Every part had its purpose. Next came another important stage, completing the signal transmission system. I took a coaxial cable, type commonly used for TV antennas. First, I carefully used a utility knife to cut away a thin layer of the outer insulation. Then I gently separated the surrounding metal shielding mesh. Next, continued, trimming away the plastic layer around the center core to expose the thin copper wire inside. After preparing the cable, I grabbed a red plug connector. I used a screwdriver to open it up and expose the internal metal contacts. Then, I inserted the prepared cable into the connector. The copper core was secured to one contact point. While the shielding mesh was wrapped and fixed onto the remaining section to improve signal stability. Once everything was aligned properly, I tightened all the fixing points and closed the connector back up. At this point, it looked like a homemade mini signal adapter. Next, on the other end of the cable, I installed an F5 jack. I twisted it evenly, so the threaded section tightly gripped the cable's outer layer. Then I added a right angle adapter to make it easier to plug into the back of the TV. To make the connections more secure, I wrapped the entire connection area with electrical tape. Next, to complete the central connection section of the system, I took a plug splitter like this. I plugged the custom-made red connector directly into the splitter. First was the Sony charger that already had the SIM card, installed inside earlier. Next, I grabbed the original Samsung charger again and plugged it into the remaining. Now it was time for the test. I brought the device over to the TV. I connected the circuit system to the Samsung charger. Then I plugged the cable into the antenna and port on the back of the TV. After that, I used the remote control to open the settings menu and selected automatic. Digital channel scanning. The progress bar started moving. The first few seconds were pretty quiet, but then channels slowly began appearing. 12 channels. 25 channels, and the number kept increasing. Eventually, the TV found dozens of broadcast channels. What was surprising was that the picture quality looked quite clear, without noticeable noise or lag, a truly fascinating result. Of course, the effectiveness still depends on your location and the surrounding signal strength. But clearly, with a little creativity, you can absolutely turn simple everyday objects into a functional system. If you enjoyed this video, try making it yourself and see what results you get. Thanks for watching.